impact of Category 3 Hurricane Melissa makes landfall on the southern coast of the eastern region of Cuba. And several nations demanded on Tuesday the lifting of the U.S. blockade on Cuba before the United Nations General Assembly. And on Monday, during the ordinary session of the National Assembly of Venezuela, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was declared persona non grata. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In the early hours of Wednesday, Hurricane Melissa made landfall in Cuba in the province of Santiago de Cuba in the municipality of Guamá as a Category 3 hurricane. The Cuban Meteorological Institute reported that the system's interaction with land led to its weakening, reporting a decrease in its maximum sustained winds of up to 185 kilometers per hour. Melissa will continue moving northeast at a speed of 19 kilometers per hour and is expected to continue weakening over the next 12 to 24 hours. The meteorological authorities of the province of Santiago de Cuba reported an accumulation of 124 millimeters of rain in the early morning hours and warned that it will continue to intensify throughout the day. And Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel addressed the people of the eastern region ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Melissa and called to act responsibly during and after the passage of the storm. At the same time, the Cuban leader affirmed that multiple brigades are already on site to start the recovery operations as soon as the weather conditions allow them.
I believe that we have worked intensively, responsibly, with great dedication and effort, in a timely and consistent manner. This has enabled us to evacuate a large number of people to safe places and to take measures to protect the main resources of the economy and the belongings of people living in areas that are particularly vulnerable to flooding, landslides, or other types of danger. Now the most important thing is for all of us to act responsibly, for the population to strictly comply with the measures and guidelines issued by the defense authorities at the regional, municipal, provincial, and national level. It should be noted that multiple teams are already in the eastern region of the country, in the provinces that will be most affected by this hurricane, to work in the recovery of the damages caused by the hurricane. In other words, there are already electricity brigades, water resource brigades, communications brigades, and construction brigades that will work together with the forces of each territory to repair the damages. In addition, United Nations agencies have made resources available to the country in advance, and a group of resources is already in place to provide assistance and care to those affected by this weather event.
In other news, at least 26 people were injured when they reacted in panic to the collapse of several buildings following a 6.1 magnitude earthquake west of Turkey. According to the authorities' report, citizens were injured after jumping out of windows or running away in a hurry in the province of Balıkesir. In this regard, Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya assured that there were no fatalities after the earthquake that occurred on Monday night. In this context, and on the instructions of the government, teams from the Provincial Director of the Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change remain deployed to assess the damage caused while removing debris in the affected areas. We now have a first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, and news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Tuesday morning, the 21st plenary meeting of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly considered the resolution necessity of ending the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba. Several representatives of the international community reiterated their rejection of the blockade, which has been characterized as a violation of international law and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Since 1992, the UN has consecutively approved resolutions calling for an end to the blockade. This is the 34th time Cuba has presented such a resolution to the international organization. However, the United States rejected these claims and intensifying the economic operation on the island. The resolution will be put to a vote by UN member states on October 29th. In this context, in use of the right to point of order, the Cuban foreign minister interrupted the U.S. representative to provide a strong response to his address.
61 and 68 of the rules. The permanent representative of the United States is not only lying, substantively deviating from the subject, but is also grossly and expressing against his president, against the dignity of the Assembly and the member states. He is doing so in an uncivilized, crude, and gross way that is not acceptable in this democratic forum. Mr. Waltz, this is the United Nations General Assembly. It is not a signal chat, nor is it the House of Representatives.
In addition, the Cuban foreign minister referred to the threat posed by the United States military deployment in the Caribbean.
Well, I spoke on our strong rejection on the threat that the U.S. government is creating against peace, security, and stability in the region and also in the world. It's a military deployment that we know that it doesn't work to face scourges like drug trafficking, but it constitutes an existential threat against the independence of Venezuela and all other nations of our region, against sovereignty of all states.
Also, the permanent representative of Colombia to the UN, Leonor Salabata, denounces the inclusion of Cuba as the country sponsor of terrorism.
The unjust and unilateral inclusion of Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism constitutes an unjustified measure that is aggravating the effects of the embargo and which ignores its historic contribution to peace. And Colombia can attest to that. Cuba has been a fundamental actor in the pursuit of peace in our country, playing a central role in the achievement of the final peace agreement in 2016 between the government and the FARC-EP, and also supporting its implementation, particularly the processes relating to the ceasefire, disarmament, demobilization, and the reintegration of ex-combatants.
And Cuba described as disrespectful the speech of the United States representative to the United Nations General Assembly on the need to end the financial blockade imposed by Washington against the island. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, Ana Yancy Rodriguez, described as disrespectful and uncivilized the speech in Washington that diminishes the Cuban struggle and falsely accuses the Cuban government of threatening its national security and supporting terrorism, as well as violating the freedoms of its citizens. The Deputy Foreign Minister emphasized that despite the intimidating attitudes of the United States, the world will once again show overwhelming support for Cuba, as well as for the lifting of the blockade and for justice, truth, and international law to be respected for the Cuban people. We now have our second break coming up. Before, as always, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. The final break, don't go away. Welcome back. In the United States, the Senate approved a measure ending the national emergency declaration invoked to impose tariffs on Brazilian products. Legislators approved the measure with 52 votes in favor and 48 against after some of the legislators emphasized that such trade measures affect U.S. consumers. The national emergency was declared by U.S. President Donald Trump in July in retaliation for the indictment of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, accused of attempting a coup d'etat. The Senate's action takes place while the U.S. President is on a 5-day tour of Malaysia, Japan, South Korea, and China. The House is expected to approve other legislative measures to end Trump's tariffs against Canada and other countries around the world this week. And during the third Minsk International Conference on Eurasian Security, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko outlined the country's key proposals for the peace agenda. The head of state presented 4 proposals summarizing Belarus' commitment to promoting peace. Lukashenko's proposals focus on prohibiting sanctions on food and medicine, protecting critical international infrastructure, offering solutions to the migration crisis, and taking measures in the field of artificial intelligence. In addition, the Belarusian leader emphasized that 80 years after the formation of the United Nations, it is crucial for international organizations to fulfill their mission of providing solutions to global issues. Moving on to our topics, in Brazil, at least 80 people died on Tuesday in Rio de Janeiro's most deadly police operation ever, which targeted a mayor gun days before the city hosts global events related to the United Nations Climate Summit known as COP30. Throughout the day, ambulances transported injured civilians and officials to the Getulio Vargas State Hospital in Rio de Janeiro. Among them was Agent Marcos Vinicius de Carvalho, who died upon arrival at the hospital due to gunshot wounds. According to health authorities, the hospital was overwhelmed after the arrival of the injured, whose number exceeded 80. The so-called contention operation mobilized about 2,500 security forces in favelas of Alemão and Peña. And the National Assembly of Venezuela unanimously declared the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, persona non grata for her complicity with the United States in its aggression against Venezuela. The decision, backed by all political sectors in Parliament, was a resounding response to the government of Trinidad and Tobago's decision to open its doors to U.S. military forces responsible for criminal acts in the Caribbean. The President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, emphasized the decision and supported all the measures agreed by the National Executive to denounce and suspend all energy agreements signed with and Tobago in response to the country's submissive behavior towards a foreign power.
Trinidad and Tobago praises the United States attack and calls for the elimination of all drug traffickers, because the rule of law no longer exists, because international relations cease to exist, because international law is being brushed aside, and this lady should read a little about the history of Trinidad and Tobago, so she knows how empires treat their colonies, so they know how Trinidad and Tobago was exchanged for Minorca in the Treaty of Amiens, because it belonged to the Captaincy General of Venezuela, and how, after some skirmishes and battles between England and Spain, the two kings shaked hands, yes, and how they exchanged them like trump cards. Give me Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll give you Minorca back. That is the fate of the colonies when they no longer serve the purposes of Marco Rubio. They will be discarded like rubbish. They will be exchanged for currency as they did in 1798 with Trinidad and Tobago. You should learn from your own history that this is the devil's embrace, that this will only lead to suffering and more acute poverty for the people of Trinidad.
The President of the Venezuelan National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, also assured that for years Venezuela was generous with Trinidad and Tobago in terms of hydrocarbons.
We don't need gas from Venezuela. When the mouse arrives, we'll see if you don't need gas from Venezuela.
Vamos a ver si no fue generoso como lo fue.
We'll see if it wasn't as generous as that energy agreement signed between one of the largest gas reserves on the entire planet, located in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and a country that has completely depleted its gas reserves.
In the fertile lands of Aragua, banana, Campura city, Venezuela is not only a fundamental pillar of the local cuisine, but a source of employment that boosts the local and national economy. Our colleague Alvaro Fragua, who continues to explore this great country, brings us the following report.
Under optimal conditions of sunlight and humidity, plantains and bananas have become the heart of the economy in Santa Cruz de Aragua. Behind every fruit lies an organized community that lives from the land, and in it has found a future.
All the staff are around here on the farm. They're all locals, from different towns, some from Lamas, and even some from Sucre. Right now, we have about 70 direct workers, and with indirect ones, we reach around 120.
Each bunch requires precise care. The cut becomes art. Farmers learn from a young age how to cut, clean, and select the fruit, respecting the cycles of nature. It's hard work, but full of pride.
To cut the bunch that's ready for harvest. Look, these leaves will be trimmed to make it easier to cut the bunch. The rope here, a small knot. All the leaves. Then he comes. Come and lift it. It's cut high so that this stem will feed the sprout. That's coming up. That one will be ready for the second harvest.
On the farms, women are also key. Their work and joy make the harvest a collective task, where production blends with daily life and family ties.
Yes, yes. Well, they're almost like my family because I work with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. And yes, we have fun here. We tell jokes, gossip, everything. We talk about a bit of everything.
Once cut, the plantain is washed and prepared for distribution throughout the country, but also to Curaçao, Aruba, and Bonaire. With a stable weekly production, workers are already thinking about the next step, global export.
We're ready because we follow a cycle, a weekly harvest cycle. We already have a production plan for 3 to 4 years, and if we keep it up, with God's help, we'll last much longer. With the management we've achieved, and the quality of fruit we are harvesting for the national market, we are now ready to export this fruit worldwide and open new horizons with the good work and careful handling we've achieved.
A challenge filled with perseverance and ambition that we at teleSUR will continue to follow closely. Under optimal conditions.
Well, like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on our social media on Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.